I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, July 10th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, real data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
Looking at significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean, we have a gale, actually a storm, with seas about 44 feet, and this is located southeast of New Zealand. Those seas are aimed well off to the northeast. Swell is likely being generated, radiating towards Hawaii and California. Let's get into the details. As usual, we start by looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales when they form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a push in the jet to the north, just like what we have there. That helps create a clockwise flow aloft and down at the ocean surface, sort of an eddy in the flow here, if you consider this a river. And that circulation is the hallmark of low pressure. And low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates winds. Winds, if they're strong enough, they get traction on the ocean surface, that generates seas. Seas, as they radiate away from the fetch area, eventually turn into swell. Swell and hits your beach, turns into surf. So we have a good trough, the southern branch of the jet stream here, pushing so far north that it's interacting with the northern branch of the jet stream with winds up to almost 190 knots, probably a good solid 180 knots. That's really feeding the circulation and likely supporting gale, if not storm development. As we move into Monday, the 11th of July, the trough continues, and even into Tuesday while moving off to the east. And then by about Wednesday, the trough starts falling apart, getting a little bit too pinched. The jet starts pulling apart. Support for gale development really starts ending by about Thursday, the 14th of July. And then by the time we get to Friday, we have a full split jet stream flow under New Zealand, pretty much most of the South Pacific. In fact, the southern branch is doing exactly the opposite of trough. It's a ridge pushing to the south. You get the split jet stream flow here. That supports high pressure aloft, and that pretty much is the end of the storm production machine. And that continues into Saturday and even maybe Sunday of next week. That'd be Sunday the 17th of July. But notice a bit of a trough, perhaps trying to organize here under New Zealand. We go 180 hours out. Trough, pretty gentle, but maybe it's the start of something. But a huge ridge pushing into Antarctica proper will likely lock things down. All right, let's go take a look at the effect down at the ocean's surface. Here we are, surface level pressure, surface level winds, and as expected, a storm with 50-knot winds. So gales start at 35 knots, storms at 50 knots. Covering a broad area with 45 and 50-knot winds. I think there might have even a little bit earlier today been a couple of little areas of 55-knot winds. So pretty solid indeed, all aimed to the north, we'll say north-northeast. Hawaii's at about 155, 158, something like that. So fetch aim there, and certainly at California. A little bit of shadowing here likely is in effect from the Polynesian Islands here, but maybe not too bad, especially as the system starts moving off to the east. Here we are on Monday the 11th. Things start winding down a little bit, still 40 to 45 knot winds. That's good enough. And the system itself lifting off to the north just a little bit. So we get into Tuesday, the gale starts fading with 35 knot winds, something like that, and pretty much gone by Wednesday the 13th of July. Then after that, well, another little system of winds, 30, 35 knots, probably not getting a whole lot of traction, and moving out of the California swell window, right about Southern California, about 117 west. So, not really looking too impressive. And then we're into next weekend. Yes, we see a gale developing south of New Zealand, but it's falling south, the exact opposite direction that we would want it to be. And then some sort of stormy pattern with 35, almost 40 knot winds in a fragmented area under New Zealand a week out. We'll see. Keep our eyes on this. Sometimes the models, some runs are showing something developing, others not so much. This run is one of those not so much runs. So probably not a whole lot, if at anything confidence is low. So let's go back in time. The gale that's currently southeast of New Zealand is not the only system. In fact, we're going to go back to Sunday a week ago, July 3rd. A gale started developing under New Zealand, producing seas in the 35-foot range, something like that, 36 feet here, highest seas over this whole domain. And the exact coordinates and the wind speeds, highest wind speeds over the domain, 50 knots at about the same location. So some sort of a almost storm, we'll call it, but seas never got too extreme. A second system developed on Tuesday, the 5th of July, and that was a little bit broader, 30, 28, 33-foot seas, something like that. Kind of got more organized on Wednesday, the 6th, with 33-foot seas, and sort of puttered along there, slowly fading out. So 2 swells from under New Zealand, and now we know of a third and probably stronger one that's developing. So here we are at current time, our new gale developing. This was 12Z this morning with 41-foot seas, and then there we are, current time. Looking forward, here we are. We saw this slightly different color pattern on the broader image, but you get the general idea. So we get into this evening, seas still 43 feet, and we get into Monday the 11th, tomorrow, seas still 41 feet, pushing well off to the northeast. As we get into Tuesday, the gale starts winding down with 31-foot seas, and then fading out from there as we get into Wednesday. And pretty much gone. And after that, we expect pretty much a whole lot of nothing beyond that. We'll just roll this out and take a look here. There's our little gale falling southeast next Sunday, and pretty quiet indeed. So let's go take a look at local winds, what's going on both for California and Hawaii. High pressure, it's July. That's pretty much the standard thing. Actually, a little bit of a low is up here in the Gulf of Alaska. I think I saw seas in the 18-foot range being generated by it. I mean, there'll be a little bit of wind swell that's going to come into California maybe midweek, but we're talking 3 feet, 3.5 feet at 10 seconds, something like that. Nothing too impressive. Anyway, so we get into Monday, the 11th of July. Light winds near the coast, but off Cape Mendocino, the standard summertime pressure gradient, 25-knot winds out of the north. Trades into the Hawaiian Islands at 15 knots. Tuesday, the 12th, pretty much the same sort of deal, 20, 25-knot winds, generating some wind swell, light winds, maybe even south winds, eddy flow along north and central California coast. Trades for the Hawaiian Islands. Wednesday, same sort of deal again. Thursday, the 14th of July, the fetch starts moving closer to the coast now. Things start getting a little bit lumpy. Some of that, the swell from the first gale under New Zealand should start arriving in California. That swell started hitting Hawaii today. Really small, though, nothing particularly large. Friday, wind again along north and central California coast. Some junky wind swell. Trades for the Hawaiian Islands at 15 knots. Saturday, more of the same, pretty much unchanged. High pressure in control. A broader fetch of 15-knot winds pushing into the Hawaiian Islands, likely generating east trade wind swell for the islands there. And local generated short period wind choppy, raw wind swell for California on Saturday. That's north and central California. Then we get into Sunday. Pretty much the same deal. If anything, winds start picking up 25 knots along the California coast. Big fetch of trades into the Hawaiian Islands and likely generating wind swell there. And as we get into Monday, more of the same. So whatever swell we get during that window, pretty bumpy and raw for California unless you can be at protected breaks. Southern California should be fine. And then, of course, the east trade wind swell for the Hawaiian Islands. The snow forecast dashboard for the Pacific Crest Trail, Tioga Pass Resort in the High Sierra. No snow, of course. It's the temperatures here. We had been seeing occasional dips of freezing temperatures below 14,000 feet. Now it's all above freezing temperatures, 14,000 feet and up beyond. So if anything, whatever snow is left will continue to melt off. All right, let's go take a look long-term. What's going on with the Madden Julian Oscillation and the El Nino Southern Oscillation, the two most important oscillations affecting Pacific weather and swell and storm production. As usual, we start by looking for signs of the active phase of the MJO, the Madden Julian Oscillation, that periodic weather oscillation that traverses the planet on the equator, moving from west to east. The active phase on one side of the planet, the inactive phase on the other. They rotate around the planet, diametrically opposed to each other. The active phase is the one we're interested in. That, when it moves over the West Pacific, imparts energy to the jet stream, both in the north and southern hemisphere, and that in turn can feed storm production. Also, the active phase of the MJO can suppress trade winds over the West Pacific. That, in turn, can create what's known as a Kelvin wave. Warm water that's in the far West Pacific can start being sloshing to the east underneath the equator, about 150 meters below it, and it will push the whole way under the equator from the West Pacific, eventually erupting off Ecuador. When it does, it erupts to the surface, creating a pool of warm water there. If you get successive active phases of the MJO and successive Kelvin waves, that can help usher in El Nino. And of course, El Nino is like a long-running active phase of the MJO. Instead of just the normal MJO system runs for about 4 to 6 weeks, but in El Nino, it's like an active phase of the MJO that runs for a year or more. So, very good for storm production. All right, so we're looking for signs of the active phase of the MJO. This is data from the TAO buoy array, series of buoys strung across the equator used to monitor El Nino. The East Pacific here, the West Pacific here, the equator here, the date line right there, 180 west, that's New Guinea there. We're just looking at the arrows. The longer the arrows, the stronger the winds. So pretty strong east winds in the East Pacific, strong east over the Central Pacific, and strong east in what we call the Kelvin wave generation area, the West Pacific, that area from 135 east to about 170 west. When you have west winds or west anomalies in this area, this is where you can generate Kelvin waves. All right, it's not the actual wind speed, the means here, the average winds over a 5-day period. It is the anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. Yeah, these strong east winds are stronger than normal for this time of year, so we have easterly anomalies in the East Pacific, moderate easterly anomalies in the Central Pacific, and moderate to strong easterly anomalies in the Kelvin wave generation area, the exact opposite of what you would want to see in an active phase of the MJO, sort of indicating the inactive phase of the MJO is in control. Let's go see what's going to happen for the next week. Next up, 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies, the east-west component of the wind, but this is over the entire planet. Disregard the pink stripes here. There was a data outage on this during these periods here. But, so the whole planet, well, the date line is 180 west, the far West Pacific about 135 east, so it starts right about there. And Ecuador over about 80 west, something like that. But we're interested only in the Kelvin wave generation area because that's the area where, 1, you generate Kelvin waves, and 2, the active phase of the MJO can impart energy to the jet stream. All right, so from 135 east to about 170 west, so you can just draw a box in your mind right there. Now, clearly, a bunch of purples here. Purples are easterly anomalies, typically associated with the inactive phase of the MJO. You can see from the later part of June all the way through today and for the next week, strong inactive phase, or at least that's what appears like, is in control. Literally no westerly anomalies in the Kelvin wave generation area, not supportive of Kelvin wave development, and theoretically not adding additional energy to the jet stream. That said, clearly we have a storm in the South Pacific. So the MJO is not the begin-all and end-all of everything, but the active phase of the MJO generally tends to enhance the standard jet stream flow, where the inactive phase of the MJO and these sort of easterly anomalies tend to suppress it, but not completely. All right, so let's go out 2 weeks. This is outgoing OLR, outgoing long wave radiation. Fancy words for cloud cover. If the active phase of the MJO is a low pressure system, low pressure systems take energy, it's rising air, pushes it up into the atmosphere, moist air condenses at higher elevations where it's colder, and that in turn creates precipitation and clouds. All right, so let's get ourselves oriented. South America, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea, equator, right there, EQ, 180 is the date line, Kelvin wave generation area right around in here. Now the blues are negative anomalies. That means more clouds, less sun. This is outgoing long wave radiation. That would be sunlight reflecting off the ocean's surface. But if you have clouds, you have lower than normal outgoing long-wave radiation anomalies. So this would mean perhaps the active phase of the MJO trying to develop today in the West Pacific, 5 days from now continuing, fading slowly as we get 2 weeks out. That was the statistic model. The dynamic model, not even as optimistic as that. Yes, they start out with the same conditions, but the active phase, for the most part, looks to be weak and confined to the maritime continent. The maritime continent is all these little islands, Bali, all Sumatra, all that right around in here, Indonesia. All right, so looking at the two models, comparing them, the statistic model, the dynamic model, about the same result. So pretty good correlation between the two models. Phase diagrams, a little bit deeper dive into what's going on. All right, so the MJO moves west to east. We've talked about that from the Indian Ocean here, over the maritime continent, the West Pacific, East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. You can see, I think this is March 31st. Here's where the active phase has been as it's traversing around. That's May, or I'm sorry, that was June. Well, May 31st, June, through the month of June into July. Here we are today, right here where the heavy dot is, the black dot. Now, if the dot is inside this circle, the active phase of the MJO is considered to be extremely weak. The forecast here, 3 different tracks showing it moving to the West Pacific, but exceedingly weak. This per the statistic model. The dynamic model over here saying, no, it's not even going to move to the West Pacific. It's just going to kind of noodle around more or less where it is over the maritime continent, and extremely weak. So still pretty good agreement between the two models. 850 millibar wind anomalies for the whole Pacific Basin. Blues are easterly anomalies, inactive phase of the MJO. Reds, yellows, oranges, whatever color this is, the active phase, westerly anomalies. But we can actually, in this chart, so this is past performance here, right? Kelvin wave generation area, 135 east to about 170 west, so this box. But you can go the whole way up the chart. That's the area we're interested in. You can see the blues here, easterly anomalies building. No big surprise, this dotted contour here is the inactive phase of the MJO. It's set up in late June, moving over the date line today and moving towards the East Pacific over the next, well, that's a 1 week there. With the active phase here shown, you can actually see westerly anomalies trying to drag into the Kelvin wave generation area about a week from now, not making it very far, not even making it halfway across it, and then pretty much fading out. You can assume the active phase of the MJO, this black solid contour, really extends the whole way over, like here somewhere. This suggests when you get this where the active phase really does nothing, this is a pulse of La Nina. The models have been forecasting that. Not a big surprise. But this does not help support Kelvin wave development, doesn't impart energy to the jet stream. So we're kind of in a hole here in July. We'll see where we end up. The westerly anomalies start collapsing back into the maritime continent at the end of July. And as we get into August, no signs of anything significant happening. So let's look out even further, go out 3 months, all right? Now, past performance is down here. The one thing that jumps out, in the date line, right here, right up the middle. Blues, strong easterly anomalies back in March, focused on the date line. That's where the core of La Nina has been for 2 years now, something like that. But you do notice that those easterly anomalies seem to be more centered already now for the past week or so at about 150 west, so south of Hawaii on the date line, and are forecast to continue there, if not, and this is a stretch, sliding a little bit further east as we get into late September, October. The westerly anomalies here that have been pretty much locked over 120 east, that more or less continues. But you do notice, see these easterly anomalies here, they were filling the Kelvin wave generation area. You see this sort of dividing line, the white and the blue, somewhere right along here. We'll say that's roughly about 150 east. Seems like westerly anomalies, if not right now, are already starting to make a little bit more headway into the West Pacific than they have for the past 2 years, maybe suggesting some softening of the La Nina pattern. We're not going to get too invested in that outcome, but that sort of looks to be what is going on, and the model has been amazingly consistent regarding this forecast and has been unwavering even as we get closer to it. We'll overlay the MJO here. Dotted contour, this is the inactive phase of the MJO. We're in it. It's already at the date line, moving out of the Kelvin wave generation area. Here's our next active phase of the MJO with its little tiny finger of westerly anomalies, making it to about 150, maybe 160 east, something like that, but not impressive at all. The interesting part is beyond, as we get into August and September here, is just this steady, weak, non-stop active phase of the MJO pattern and slowly making its way further off to the east, suggesting maybe that the core of La Nina is moving east. At least that's the way it looks like here. But then we overlay the low-pass filter, the real El Nino, La Nina indicator. Here, this dotted contour, this is the high-pressure bias. In fact, we can take the MJO out of here. Maybe that'll make it easier to see. We're in the high-pressure bias here, the La Nina indicator, a little bit weaker, but in the next 4 days or so, second contour building, if not a third contour as we get into September, and not giving up really anything in terms of positioning or strength. The low pressure bias, the El Nino indicator, well, pretty much locked straight solid over the maritime continent, it too building to about 3 contours, but we want to see these westerly anomalies. I mean, it's kind of hinted at, but this is definitely a reach here. You kind of get the sense it's trying to make some progress, but as of right now, is this any different than what we saw last year? We think so, in that the core of the easterly anomalies, which were right on the date line, are shifting east. One would think the core of the westerly anomalies would shift east, but as of right now, not showing it on the charts. But we think that might be coming. All right, so let's get some more sense now. Enough of the MJ. Let's talk about ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, that longer-term oscillation that goes for a couple years active, a couple years inactive, maybe a year or two of neutral in between. We're looking at ocean temperatures, not on the surface, but down on the equator from 2 north to 2 south, the whole way across the equatorial Pacific. This is the West Pacific here. This is the East Pacific here. We're looking at temperatures, warm waters, 29-degree isotherm. I think it was at about 170 last week, so it's sort of given up a little bit of ground. The 28-degree isotherm, it's been at about 180, so maybe it lost a degree or two, but it's not really showing any signs of movement. 26-degree isotherm, locked pretty much about 127 west, something like that. The 24-degree isotherm pushing into Ecuador. So no signs of any major motion of warm or cold waters at the moment. But it's not the actual temperatures. It is the anomalies, the difference from normal for this time of year. Right now we have plus 2 degrees centigrade anomalies in the West Pacific, with a finger of water connecting that to a much larger, broader pocket and warmer at 3+ degrees centigrade in the East Pacific. This is your classic Kelvin wave kind of sign. It was generated by an active phase of the MJO months ago. It's poised, if not ready, to erupt off of Ecuador as we speak. In fact, there's another model right here. You can see it a little bit better. Clear, warm temperatures pushing the whole way from beyond New Guinea into a point 100 west. Well, let's see, Ecuador is right here. The Galapagos are about 90. So there's just this last little bit of cool water at depth sort of holding the Kelvin wave at bay. There is this broader pool of cool water here that's driven by strong trades and upwelling. But we believe this active phase of the MJO is going to make its way into Ecuador. You can already see signs of it starting to reach up to the surface too, maybe starting to create some warming. Sea level anomalies, another way, we're looking at the height of the ocean surface. Strip out the waves, wind waves, tides, and is the sphere of the ocean higher or lower than normal? What this means is if you have warm water at depth, like here's the equator, right, and there's the dateline, Chile, Peru, Central America, Baja right there, Hawaii right there, that's the Galapagos, New Guinea, you get it. We see this kind of this thing, this plus positive anomalies, 0 to 5 centimeter, 10 centimeter anomalies. So warm water at depth expands, it'll create a bump on the ocean surface. Cold water at depth will contract. The water above it will get a little bit of a divot on it. So we've had cold water minus 15 centimeter anomalies over the Galapagos maybe a month ago, and now we're at dead neutral and retreating, and we have positive anomalies that have been steadily working their way across the Pacific. Just another sign that there is warm water at depth here, a big Kelvin wave working its way off to the east, hopefully going to erupt with some vigor, but it is a very slow-moving Kelvin wave. Upper ocean heat anomalies. All right, so you can see there was a Kelvin wave December of last year, probably an active phase of the MJO generating west winds here in the November timeframe, took warm waters here, pushed it off across the Pacific. Then we had another upwelling event in February, basically during the entirety of the spring. That is all but gone there. The last little bit of cool water at about 85 west and retreating quickly. You can see warm water working its way across the Pacific to about 100 west, trying to work its way into Ecuador. All these charts pretty much are telling the same story. Large Kelvin wave making its way across, not particularly vigorous, not super warm, but trying to get trying to clear out this cold water pattern here that's been in play and get us at least back to neutral water temperatures. Once that happens, you get a normal evaporation setup. The jet stream becomes more favorable in the Pacific, and then all of a sudden, the swell machine wakes up. Upper ocean heat anomalies for the area from the date line to about 100 west, just on the equator. You can see very cold water, volume of cold water, and the extent of it in the we'll call it the central to east Pacific back October, November last year. We got our little Kelvin wave that we talked about that showed up in February, and then cold water returned, but not nearly as cold as here. You can see there's been this steadily upward trend. We have yet another warming event that is occurring. We suspect there'll be yet another cool dip after that, but probably even proportionally smaller than this. Then pretty much after that, one can imagine that La Nina would be over. The detailed sea surface temperature anomalies were at the ocean's surface now, not down in the ocean, but at the surface. Now, a totally different story up on the surface. Chile, Peru, Central America, Hawaii right here, the equator roughly right in here. Oh, the Galapagos right there. Okay, cold water off Peru and Chile and filling a giant sector of the equatorial Pacific. But also notice warming waters building from about 150 west, so south of Hawaii, the whole way to the Galapagos. And this is the beginnings of that Kelvin wave starting to erupt, starting to cut some legs out of this cold water La Nina pattern. Also, there's been this steady, cold, really cold water here off of Peru. This is the upwelling of the last little pocket of the cold water at depth. This is getting progressively weaker. It isn't even really distinguishable from anything else anymore, which is a good sign. Means all that cold water at depth is pretty much discharged to the surface. And now, in the next couple of weeks, we expect warming to build more consistently over the equatorial East Pacific, which is what we want to see. That said, we have the inactive phase of the MJO in control. We're looking at sea surface temperature trend for the past 7 days. South America, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea, equator right there, the date line right there. But it's this area right here we're looking at. We see some warming, little fingers of that Kelvin wave trying to erupt to the surface. We also see two pockets of cooling here. Not sure where this is coming from, though it could possibly be related to the inactive phase of the MJO. Easterly winds create upwelling, westerly winds create downwelling, that is warming. So strong trades, you get cold waters. The reverse of trades, you get warm waters. The warmer the water, the closer to El Nino you are, and the more energy that gets imparted to the jet stream. The backed off view, still clearly a La Nina signal with all this cold water over the equatorial Pacific. Our little bit of hope right here is this warm water. It's just 5 degrees north and south of the equator. That's really what makes all the difference. The official El Nino region, they call it the Nino 3.4 region, is out here. So some warming, some cooling, goes from 170 to 120, so you can draw a box right there. The Nino 1.2 region right here. And you can divide it up, Nino 1.2, Nino 3.4, then what we call the Kelvin wave generation area over in here. West winds in this area can create the Kelvin wave. The Kelvin wave travels under the equator, not at the surface, the whole way across the Pacific, erupts out here. You get this warming signal, and the trades take that warm water, start dragging it into the Nino 3.4 region, and a little bit at a time, the equatorial Pacific warms up, and then the jet stream and everything changes in response to that. Temperatures in the Nino 1.2 region, the area right there by Ecuador, minus 1.359 degrees, so a degree and a third roughly below normal. La Nina threshold, if you're at a half a degree below normal for 5 consecutive months, then you're basically in La Nina. We're clearly in La Nina. We've been in La Nina for a long time. No real change, no obvious trend. I mean, I guess one could look at this and say, yeah, there's a steady, slow upward trend since May, something like that, but not really super noticeable. The Nino 3.4 region looking much better. Temperatures at 303 thousandths of a degree below normal. We're out of the La Nina area. We got there somewhere around, was it June 8th or something like that. Now, officially, we're not out of La Nina, but there is, because again, it has to be for 5 consecutive 3 months periods, and we're only talking maybe a month now. But a month is a lot better than where we've been, and notice this, temperatures a third of a degree below normal. This is going to come in handy in a minute when we go look at the forecast. All right, so what does the atmosphere think is going on? I mean, clearly there's a bunch of cold water on the equatorial Pacific, so it would seem that the atmosphere should still be biased in a La Nina configuration. We look at the difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, basically in the Indian Ocean, Tahiti in the Pacific, and if pressure is generally lower in Tahiti, the index will go negative. If it's higher over Tahiti, the index will go positive. Negative indexes is what you want to see typically during the active phase of the MJO for a couple of weeks. And then for longer periods of time, over a period of months, then that's your El Nino indicator. Today, the index, 9.23. I mean, that's pretty good considering we were at, plus 30 and have been hovering in the plus 20 for long time. So maybe pressure dropping in general a little bit in the Pacific. 30-day average takes the noise out of this. Today, the index plus 14.85. Where have we been? Well, probably it hasn't really moved at all in a month. So steady La Nina, stable La Nina state according to this. The 90-day average really gives you your El Nino La Nina indicator, plus 16.94. That's pretty high. That's clearly in La Nina territory. We peaked out, I thought, where was it? Somewhere up, I think it was near 19 or 20, maybe a month ago. So we're off our peak, but still quite clearly in La Nina territory. The 30-day moving SOI graphed out. You can see it. So the 0, if you're below 0, you're down in negative. You're in somewhat El Nino territory. Last time we were even close was 2 years ago, January 2020. And so these downward spikes are the active phase of the MJO. The upward spikes are the inactive phase. Clearly, the inactive phase has had the upper hand. We peaked out, where was this? April, somewhere at 20 plus, like I said. Slowly trying to work our way down, but still clearly in positive territory. And no clear sign of any major bottoming out occurring. We think it's going to be a slow demise, little bits of warm water slowly chipping away at the equatorial East Pacific, sort of like what's happening today. And that will slowly build over the Nino 3.4 region, and little bit at a time, La Nina will slowly lose its grip. At least that's what we think. All right, so sea surface temperature anomaly forecast for the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region, that area on the equator from 120 west to 170 west. Temperatures, so this is where we were talking about. Temperatures actually, as best we can tell per one index, are minus 0.3. This is saying minus 0.7 today, okay? And forecast falling from there. I say the difference, which is almost a half degree difference, is that's the difference between being in clearly in La Nina territory and maybe approaching being neutral. Regardless, the raw data from the CFS model suggests temperatures sort of slowly falling. We have this easterly anomaly pattern, this strong inactive phase of the MJO that's occurring now, driving temperatures, according to this, back down to 1 degree below neutral in November. But then after that, a significant shift, a race to neutral, if not above, as we get deeper into, or really as we get into the start of winter and beyond that. But this is the raw data. NOAA knows that that isn't exactly right. They correct it. Still, this is showing temperatures. Here we are roughly today. Temperatures still at 0.6 of a degree below normal. And we know we're at 0.3, so even this is biased a little bit on the cool side. It's suggesting temperatures falling to, about 0.75 of a degree below normal at worst. In reality, that might just be right at the threshold in November, and then heading upwards from there. So kind of a little bit of ambiguity. Different data sources present their data differently, and certainly the sea surface temperature, the third of a degree below normal that we were looking at, actual measurements, that's probably raw data, not as corrected, but we think this is biased a little bit on the cold side as well. So we'll just keep our eyes on this. But what this is really suggesting is we are going to have a dip in the early fall, we'll call it, but not a super big dip, and then a pretty quick correction after that, clearly suggesting that La Nina, if you're already getting warming temperatures in the ocean, and warming as quickly as this, that suggests that something in maybe we'll say the October-November time frame, atmospherically, Kelvin wave generation-wise, active phase of the MJO is going to start happening in the October-November time frame. And when we were looking over here, again, I'm just going to take this out of here, and we're just looking, we go, looks like easterly anomalies start eroding in late September, early October. So maybe this is just reaching completely here, but maybe there is some sense that the model suggests a significant weakening of La Nina as we get into the fall. So for right now, things are looking pretty good. There has been 2 small gales under New Zealand that have produced 2 small swells, the first of which is already starting to hit Hawaii, real small we're talking, but rideable, and is working its way towards California. Second swell behind that, a little bit bigger, and then we know there is a solid gale in development southeast of New Zealand. We'll call it the Central South Pacific, with a good amount of seas, probably the highest seas of the season so far, the best storm of the season so far, and that swell will radiate north. The model's pretty stable on that, so pretty much looks like 3 swells locked and loaded coming our way. Get the most of it. After that, things quiet down for a little bit, but then we start looking longer term, and again, it's this, well, we're kind of in a La Nina mode. It's going to make its last little surge here in the, we'll say, October-November timeframe, but at the same time, we also think that atmospherically there will be some significant shifts going on, both atmospherically and oceanic-wise, and as we get into the, we'll say, early to mid part of winter, maybe a significant shift will set up. The jet stream will reorganize. Precipitation will start falling in California again, back into the normal range. And then also the swell production machine might really step up as we get into, we'll say, February, something like that. So we were sort of saying this last week too. The later part of winter might be reasonably productive. In fact, last winter, precipitation-wise, we just did a quick look, and totally normal snowfall, total normal water equivalent. It all fell in about 3 events, and it all fell, it was boom or bust. But last year was normal. We think, even though it was definitely not quote-unquote normal, just numerically it was, but we think this coming winter will feel, at least as we get into February, a little bit more normal and a little bit more regular in terms of the frequency of the precipitation and, the general pattern. And certainly surf-wise, we are hoping, at a minimum, that we should see some significant shifts in the right direction. All right, that's it for this week. If you have not, please subscribe to the channel. Give us a like, thumbs up. We'd appreciate that. If you subscribe, you get automatic notifications when we post videos. And if not, go to stormsurf.com. You can get the link to the video there. We do this every Sunday in the evenings for the most part. And also, social media. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. You can see us there. We post every now and then. We try not to overdo it. Try not to spam people. But when something pretty interesting is going on, we'll make a post. All right, that's it for this week. We'll do it again next week. Same time, same channel. Thanks for watching, and be safe. Go have some fun.